For years, a crucial detail in the Madeleine McCann case went unnoticed. But when you understand what it really reveals, nothing makes sense like it did before. Imagine a frame hanging on your living room wall. It's always been there. You look at it every day, but you never noticed it's slightly crooked. Just a centimeter, almost imperceptible. But now, you can't unsee it, because once your eye adjusts to the flaw, the truth feels absurd. The Madeleine McCann case is that crooked frame. A story repeated for 15 years as if it were definitive. A girl vanishes during a vacation, her parents panic, and the whole world watches, anguished, without answers. A tragedy with no villain, no ending, no sense. But there's a detail, a small piece, that's always been there. Not hidden, in plain sight, yet ignored. Or worse, hushed up. Because if you look straight at it, the whole story starts to crumble. And what once seemed like a tragic mystery begins to sound like a well-scripted performance. This detail isn't a scoop. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a documented fact. A point in the timeline that, for some reason, no one wanted to follow. Maybe because it led somewhere darker. A place where the comfort of the official narrative simply doesn't survive. What if it's true? What if what was sold as an accident is, in fact, the result of something far more complicated? Behind every headline with Madeleine's smiling photo, there was something no one mentioned. The real story didn't fit. It had holes, unexplained moments, reactions that didn't match desperation, words spoken too soon, silences that screamed. While the whole world repeated the script of pain, innocent parents, abducted daughter, confused police, time marched on. And with it, the chance to ask, is something off here? In that pain, the quietest of all was left behind, forgotten in unread files, buried under tributes, as if a pretty memory could erase an uncomfortable question. But it's still there, just like that frame on the wall, a little out of place. There's a secret in this case that changes everything. It's not hidden, it just hasn't been heard. And if it is what it seems, then nothing you thought you knew makes sense. If you feel like something doesn't add up in this story, you're not alone. And maybe you never were. You know that feeling when something's out of place, but you can't quite pinpoint what? Since 2007, the world has heard the same story. A blonde, big-eyed girl disappears from a hotel room during a vacation in Portugal. Her parents go out to dinner, come back, and Madeleine's gone. The perfect tragedy. Instant outrage. The media explodes, and the McCanns become, in the blink of an eye, the most famous parents on the planet. But there's something odd about this script. It feels too good. Not good in a positive way, but too good to be accepted without question. It works. It hooks you, it moves you, and above all, it dodges uncomfortable questions. From the start, the way this story was told had an almost cinematic structure. The first images that circulated were carefully chosen. Madeleine smiling, background blurred. Kate and Jerry composed, holding hands. The press repeated the same words: pain, hope, tragedy, mystery. And behind it all, a machine was forming. British diplomats arrived at the scene before the Portuguese investigators could even organize the forensics. PR agencies were hired. The UK Prime Minister took a stance. The whole world was led to believe the only possible truth was a child was abducted and her parents were suffering. But the question no one wanted to ask was, what if that's not quite it? As the days passed and small details started to leak, nothing explosive, nothing that shattered the official narrative, but discomforts, noises, a lapse in monitoring the kids that night, timelines that didn't match in testimonies, a window supposedly opened by an abductor, but with marks that didn't suggest forced entry. And the most unsettling part, sniffer dogs detected the scent of blood in a corpse, first in the apartment, then in the trunk of a car rented by the McCanns weeks after the disappearance. But this fact, which in any other case would have opened a new line of inquiry, was quickly dismissed as irrelevant. The narrative was too solid to be broken by details. Are you saying the parents did something to their daughter? The British press asked, with a tone of indignant shock. That's cruel, they said. They're suffering. The narrative was already planted, and anything that strayed from it was treated as cruel, sensationalist, or even offensive. The media, governments, and much of public opinion didn't want to dismantle the comforting drama of a grieving couple. Questioning any part of the story felt like a personal attack. But truth doesn't care about comfort. The official story started repeating like a mantra. Testimonies that once seemed solid, the group dining at the tapas bar, changed over time. Descriptions of the checks on the kids' room were adjusted, but no one said anything, because admitting a flaw would mean admitting that everyone had accepted for years a version that might have been constructed. This is where everything starts to shift, because when you gather the details that were left aside, when you look at it all again, calmly, without the filter of emotion, you realize this story isn't just about what was told. It's about everything that was carefully avoided. And from here on, what comes to light isn't just an investigative error. It's a secret hidden in plain sight, and it completely changes what you thought you knew about the Madeleine McCann case. For years, everyone repeated the same story. A girl disappeared, her parents were devastated, and the world united to find her. That version became almost an absolute truth. But what almost no one knows or chooses to ignore is that there was a specific detail that never fit. Among the evidence analyzed by the Portuguese police, 2 sniffer dogs, trained solely to detect the scent of a corpse and human blood traces, reacted at 2 key spots: the apartment where the girl supposedly vanished and the trunk of the car rented by her parents weeks after she went missing. Dogs don't speak, don't opine, don't interpret, they react. And the most striking part, they also reacted to the mother's clothes. But this detail, which should have been global news, was quickly sidelined. They claimed technical failure, coincidence, or worse, a misinterpretation by the Portuguese police, and the official narrative stayed intact. Now stop and think. If this detail were in any other case involving an ordinary family, would it have been ignored like that? Or would it have become the focus of the entire investigation? Is this serious, you might be wondering? That was exactly the question one of the lead investigators asked when he saw the forensic report. His reaction was silenced. Soon after, he was removed. None of this is theory, it's documented, but almost no one talks about it. The most disturbing part is that when this fact surfaced, it didn't spark the outrage it should have. Instead, there was a visible effort to make it seem like it didn't matter. Headlines shifted focus, emotion turned to caution, and silence became a shield. Can you feel the tension in that? A detail that could flip the story upside down, treated as a footnote, as if it were too dangerous to take seriously. And that's where trust starts to unravel. Because if this information was hushed, what else was? Who decided what deserved attention and what should vanish along the way? And why? The story that seemed clear begins to crack. And each new crack reveals not just inconsistencies, but interests, political, diplomatic, institutional, and almost strategic care to preserve certain names, certain reputations, while keeping the focus on an invisible abduction. This is where many realized, maybe the case was never about finding a child. Maybe from the start, it was about protecting those who couldn't be questioned. If this detail was always there, why did almost no one talk about it? Maybe your doubt was silenced too, and you're only noticing now. It's strange how certain truths only hurt when they fall into silence. What seemed like just a detail now reveals itself as the breaking point. That point ignored for years, seen as irrelevant or out of context, changes everything when placed at the center of the story. The reaction from those who'd followed the case from the beginning was silent shock, because it wasn't just about what was revealed, it was about what they never bothered to hide, but also never explained. There was no confession, no trial, but there was a string of actions that, when connected, paint an unsettling picture. The Portuguese police, for instance, tried to revisit the investigation based on this new point, but it was too late. Public opinion was already sealed. The British press had done its job. The parents were victims, and any doubt was seen as cruelty. It didn't matter what was said afterward. Internally, among the teams still searching for answers, unease began to grow. Contradictory reports, testimonies that vanished, documents later that he felt they were all walking through a minefield, trying not to step on what they weren't supposed to see. That kind of silence weighs heavy. The parents, increasingly shielded, gave public statements that felt measured. It was as if they no longer spoke from the heart, but from a carefully crafted script. Some interviews showed them averting their eyes at simple questions, and lines like, "We believe she's still alive," sounded more like a public necessity than a personal conviction. The atmosphere around the case grew tense, rigid, almost sterile. No new line of inquiry was taken seriously if it risked the narrative already sold to the world. And yet those paying attention saw something was wrong. The impact of this secret isn't just in the case's plot, it's in how we perceive who was really in control of the story. The police didn't seem to be, the press even less so. The power lay where almost no one dared to point, in the connection between influence, image, and institutional protection. This detail, left out of the news for so long, wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. Because it didn't just raise questions about the girl's disappearance, but about the workings of a system that chooses what's acceptable to investigate and what needs to be silenced. Over the years, a few figures tried to break this pattern. A former Portuguese agent, for example, published a detailed report with glaring inconsistencies. But he was sued, discredited, labeled an enemy of the truth, precisely for trying to tell a version different from the one the world had bought. And the most striking part? None of these revelations got space in primetime papers. No headlines. No coverage worthy of the gravity of what was being said. It was as if the case, after so long, had become a modern taboo. Everyone knew something was off, but pretended not to see. By this point, the feeling was no longer about seeking justice. It was about maintaining an image, as if the priority had shifted from finding out what happened to protecting those who couldn't be touched. And when that happens, when the institutions meant to ensure transparency become tools to preserve a convenient story, truth loses space, and the lie stops being a threat to become a silent policy. This is the kind of story that doesn't end with an answer. It ends with an open wound. And even without saying anything directly, you feel the silence screams louder than any explanation. Because what's revealed here isn't just a mistake. It's proof that sometimes hiding the truth is more strategic than facing it. And even when everything seems to have gone back to normal, something inside us already knows. Nothing will be the same. It's not easy to deal with the feeling of being deceived. And it's even worse to realize you might never have had a real chance to see the full truth. Because what we've seen all this time was only what they let us see. Everything was built with such care. The interviews, the camera angles, the rehearsed lines, the press cuts, the gestures that seemed spontaneous but were timed. The Madeleine case didn't just become a tragedy. It became a product, a package ready for global consumption, with an invisible villain, suffering parents, and a search that never found anything, just more versions. And that's where the point that bothers me most comes in. The version that became official wasn't necessarily the most coherent. It was the most convenient, the one that avoided conflict, the one that protected reputations, the one that didn't point fingers too high up. And deep down, what this shows isn't just about the Madeleine case. It's about how much we've learned to accept comfortable versions of things. We cling to what lets us move forward without thinking too hard. Because thinking tires you out. Thinking unsettles. And when something challenges what we've believed for so long, the impulse is to reject, not question. But the truth, that truth living in the subtext, in the silences, in the odd gestures, in the testimonies that disappear, always finds a way back. Sometimes as doubt, sometimes as an unease that grows over time, sometimes as a forgotten piece that, when placed right, reveals the picture was never what it seemed. If this video made you feel that unease, then maybe you saw what they didn't want seen. And no, the goal here was never to point fingers or offer a ready answer. It was to shine a light on a place kept in the dark too long and give you the chance to look for yourself. No script, no frame, just the necessary discomfort to decide what's worth believing in. Now, after all this, there's a question that won't leave my mind. How many other stories have we blindly believed just because they were well told? If this case left you with the same feeling I had, that mix of anger, doubt, and a hunger to understand more, then maybe what's next is even more important. There's one more detail, one buried in hundreds of pages of the official report, a fragment almost no one mentions, maybe out of fear, maybe out of convenience, or because it simply messes up everything that seemed resolved. That's why the next video dives deep into that very point, the one that didn't make headlines, but has the potential to turn the story upside down again. And if you've made it this far, I think you've already realized that certain truths only reveal themselves when we insist on looking where no one else is. So get ready, because this new piece is jarring, but at the same time, it might be what's missing for you to piece together your own puzzle. Oh, and if you want to keep getting this kind of content, deconstructed stories, contested versions, questions that unsettle, subscribe to the channel. Not out of habit, but because you know the idea here isn't to comfort you, it's to provoke you. There's no ready script here, just questions that still hurt. And the more people question, the closer we get to something that might finally make sense. Now, I want to know what this did to you. You don't need a polished answer. Just close your eyes for a second and feel What's lingering there, stuck between your chest and throat? Which part of the story keeps nagging at you even after everything seems to have been said? Talk to me. For real. Did any part give you that knot in your stomach? Did a detail remind you of another story, maybe your own? Did a question pop up that you didn't even know you wanted to ask but now can't ignore? It could be a muddled thought, a buried anger, an old memory, or just that strange sense that something's out of place, something that, deep down, always has been. After all this, tell me, which point hit you the hardest? Write it here. I want to hear you, word for word. It doesn't need to be pretty. It doesn't need to sound right. It just needs to be honest. It could be a loose sentence, a rant, a doubt, a memory, a hunch you can't yet explain. Because the most important thing here is that it's real. Show me your take on all this. I'm curious to know how it hit you. And maybe, reading what you write, I'll better understand what it stirred in me too. Because some truths aren't uncovered alone. They're born in the meeting. In the mirror the other becomes, even unintentionally. So leave your mark here, because some stories we just watch and others cut through. They crack us open, they shake us up inside. They dust off a place we'd forgotten even existed. And when that happens, it's because deep down, it still matters. Oh, and just between us, there's something important waiting in the pinned comment. It's not an easy answer or a package promise, but if you've made it this far, I think you'll get the value of what's there. Maybe it's exactly what you didn't even know you were looking for.